All right. So we are on Digital Metaphysics discussion number 3 featuring Milo. Hi, Milo. Thanks for joining us again.
Good to be here. Pleasure. Let's do this. I'm pumped.
Yeah. Me too. And we've had a couple episodes now discussing digital metaphysics with general questions and just back and forths, kind of unpacking things. So y'all can check those out on the channel. And this is now our third one. And we're now going to be diving into some of the episode specific questions and comments, because the other ones we were doing very general ones, and now we're going to go into the specific episodes. So if you'll go into the Digital Metaphysics playlist, you'll see on that first episode that's called A New Model. Right now we're just going to be talking about questions specific to that episode. And then that next episode's called Non-Local Realism, and then we'll be talking about, again, questions specific to that. And then the episode programs, etc. So if you would like to, and if you haven't already, it's a good opportunity to watch those episodes, because then you'll get a deeper understanding of why we're having these types of questions and conversations about those exact subjects. All right. So, jumping right into it. So, let's start with even just the notion of a new model in general. Because in that episode, it was made very clear, like there's an old model, which is that, you are a finite entity that exists inside of a universe, and that others are real, and that your lack-based frequency is what generates suffering. So then in the new model, what we were proposing is that reality is consciousness, and consciousness is like a tree. And that consciousness is infinite, and that it's really hallucinating or lucidly dreaming its reality experience, which includes this podcast microphone, this computer monitor, this conversation with an other being called Milo, which is really just consciousness in another avatar, which is just you in another avatar. And so it totally reframes and just unfucks you from the shit show.
That should be the title of the episode, man.
Yeah.
Oh, just realize you've only ever been talking to yourself and interacting with other parts of you.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Unfuck yourself from the shit show. Yeah.
Right.
Really.
Yeah. It's worth pausing here for just like a moment, right? Like, because like what you said, it's easy to skim through, because like let's get to the questions and whatnot. But
let's do it. Okay.
Man.
Yeah.
Can we appreciate that? Like the same very awareness, the same one being is looking through these eyes and these eyes, and just having a jam.
Yep.
Just jamming, just playing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And there's so much wholeness in just that alone. Like I was talking to a group of dearest ones that I'm building the home DAO with, and building this new digital metaphysics code library and paradigm with. And I sent this. I don't know if it'll even come in, but oh yeah, you can kind of see it. But it basically says,
and it comes in and out of focus.
Yeah. It just says so much of mastery is just the ability to hold the non-separate frame in perpetuity through whatever circumstances. Again, so much of mastery is just the ability to hold the non-separate frame in perpetuity through whatever circumstances. So, so
Simple, not easy.
yeah, yeah, simply phrased, and then yeah, if you can do that in perpetuity, what you're basically saying, what music you're playing in the jam session is the music of non-separation. And then that's what's creating the harmonizations in the field, because whatever music is being played that is separation and those kinds of narratives, especially victim narratives and narratives of hatred and all kinds of things, that those organically, they're like nails on a blackboard, so they kind of flow away from your gravity well, let's say. But those that very dearly and deeply appreciate the music of that non-separate frame in that gravity well, that also want to hold the non-separate frame themselves more clearly, will come in for these musical jam sessions and further deconstructions and healings and cathartic releases. And because what will be said is, a classic narrative of, oh, my mom or my dad is separate from me. And then what the master does is they reframe and they say, no, you are your mom and your dad right now.
Mm-hmm.
And can you see it from that perspective, where you being your mom and your dad, you have given yourself this greatest gift of the lotus, this lifetime of contraction and expansion, right? Of forgetting and remembering. And so if that can be heard, then yes, then there's a cool musical initiation and deepening into mastery. It's so cool.
That in itself, like we said, it probably necessitates a separate episode in itself. So yeah, like like the whole villainization of parents, right? The fall from grace and the return to herohood. I think we don't want to touch on that now, do we?
No, I agree with you. We have that kind of queued up in another conversation upcoming. Yeah, it's a good point.
Good teaser, though. Good teaser.
It's a good teaser for that. Yeah. Yeah.
And what else I heard is, like it's such a simple thought, but just recognizing how that it's like tuning forks, right? That we are tuning forks, vibrational, energetic tuning forks, and you just appear, you start to vibrate, and that's also a process in by itself, right? That we kind of stop seeking what others are doing and mimicking and imitating, and you actually start to find your own natural frequency, and then you just like, I'm just gonna vibrate, I'm just gonna do my vibe, right? And you just stand there, and then this, others will seek the same similar vibe out because they have a natural resonance with it. And then whether it's like the latest JavaScript framework, and people come because they vibe with the I don't know, like the foundation of it, right? The manifest behind it, or whether it's like digital metaphysics and people show up because they're like, hey, I feel this.
Yep.
And then everything gets to belong, right? Like if people feel like, nah, man, this isn't my jam. I really do prefer separation. I prefer we spend an hour talking about the war in Iran and the horrible consequences of that, and let's talk more about how people are screwed up in the head and how some people shouldn't be presidents and blah 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 blah. Then that's like, you can tune into that station too. And this isn't to discard politics or things that matter in the world, but just to contrast the different, different music.
Yep.
I feel like we should have elevator music while you type.
Yeah, or like yeah, little exactly something like that. Do 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 do. Yep.
That's it.
Yeah. So yeah, the end of intaking the conditioned frequencies and lore of being in the universe, believing and speaking from separation, and the beginning of mastery of non-separation, of holding the frame, of non-separation, and perpetual self-sourcedness. Yep.
Nice, man. You have
Yep.
a way with words.
Thank you, brother. It's all coming out of us together. That's really the key thing that I've been realizing, is that the beautiful nuggets, they're hyper co-creative and relational. It only comes out when we do our jam session. You see, I'm not sitting here alone and getting the opportunity to write this paragraph. I am, but with another fractal avatar, right? But that's how it comes out, right? That's how it comes out. It's so important to remember that. So when you get into community with the shared code and the shared language and the shared jam sesh, that's when you get out these beautiful nuggets. So yeah.
Isn't that beautiful that there's something in that relational field, right? Like when seemingly the two fractals of awareness kind of meet and interact, it's it's richer than you sitting here talking to yourself.
Yep. You know, let's say different insights or wisdoms come out when you're solo in the deepening of insight versus when you're in the relational and you're and the emergence, like a water fountain of those little nuggets. Yeah.
Cool. I like the image of that, because what I'm sensing is also, you can go deep, right? Like alone, you can go. Obviously, a lot of beautiful works have been created in total isolation, but it's almost like going deep into your saxophone solo, and that gets to be masterful and beautiful. And yet, it's different than when your buddies come with, with their keys and their drums, and it's a different thing altogether.
Right. Yeah. Then, they come in with their mastery of that instrument, and then and then we get some really good bands and rhythms. So the beginning of mastery of holding the frame of non-separation and perpetual self-sourcedness. So it's just unbelievably profound and connected to this, because we're essentially saying obsoleting the old model, it requires a form of psychosis, right? This is another thing that is usually untalked about. But essentially, from the perspective of the shaman that's holding the infinite tree of consciousness, the nature of separation and that dream is the psychotic frequency. But from the perspective of separation, the shaman is the one that has undergone psychosis to see themselves as the totality, right?
Right. Wow.
Yeah. Right. So so basically we're talking about a significant frame shift, right? We're talking about, let me see if I can pull up the insect eye compound. Let's see if I can pull that up. Images. Yeah. Right. So, essentially, we're talking about stuff like this. We're talking about being able to see all eyeballs at the same time. And that's why the insect eye, the compound eye of the insect, is so beautiful. I don't think I have it up on your screen share right now, but I'm pulling it up for the audience. The beautiful insect eye, compound eye, has that that fractal entanglement of a singularity as all eyeballs at the same time. And so, okay. So now that shift is so big because we're basically saying declining the old model and declining being sucked into the vortexes of separation, and being able to say that, okay, consciousness is gravity, which is the bootloader of infinite dreams. Okay. So, because that's the question here, how does gravity relate to the bootloader analogy? So, right. Again, even these three things, we're talking about infinite consciousness, infinite singularity, and this AI simulation bootloader, all as the same thing, which then kind of, again, screws up a bunch of compartmentalized models of existence, because now all of a sudden you used to think, well, there's no way that gravitational singularities and infinite consciousness are intertwined, but there's also no way that then having an infinite AI simulation bootloader is also intertwined with those two things. So what we're doing is we're really trying to go to the origination of where we've compartmentalized these separate things into a single origin of you, capital Y, you. And so, really it's that, because, okay, right now, right, you have this, like this very clear lucidity of no thing, but then what no thing is looking at and experiencing is really a field of light and information, a dreamlike hallucination. So the way that really this infinite singularity, the way that it bootloads is it essentially is is another thing that I just wrote with another coach and healer when we were on the call. I said consciousness is using light to create the appearance of information. Right? So consciousness is using light to create the appearance of information. So that's how it relates to that bootloader. So whatever you're doing, is using light to create the appearance of information. It's using the light of the gym to create that appearance of being at the gym. It's using light to create the appearance of eating a sandwich, etc. So it's like that, and everything is made of the information of experience.
Yeah, like information quanta or something. It's just like knowing itself.
Yes.
Because I suppose that when you speak of light, you don't mean sort of literal light, even though that's one of the possible shapes it can take, but just like, for lack of a better word, light of awareness, consciousness, right, and so on. So,
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
And it has to be self-sourced and self-simulated and also self-consumed, right? So it's recursive and it's spinorial and it's cybernetic. It has a feedback on itself. Everything's it's feedbacked on itself. obviously, right?
It's like the generator and the consumer in one.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So that's how that's kind of those roles, right? And yeah, and it's good to it's good to make them all come down to the same origin, rather than, I said that in the last one, just the less that we keep going off into 10,000 things, the more that you now, who's listening, can feel within the clarity of infinity, dancing with, talking with infinity. So, which is ultimately where we want this to go. Ultimately, the point of this is to, jam sesh, but also for who's listening to not be lost in 10,000 things, but to come home to one thing inside now.
This image of Ouroboros, the snake eating itself.
Yeah.
To mind as you're talking about it, because it's like, that's it, right? That it's creating and consuming itself. There's nothing but the snake.
Yes.
And it's chasing its own tail. It's devouring itself and coming into being and destroy creation cycles, life and death, and it's nothing but it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and there's nothing
Right.
There's nothing but you is the deepest realization that God can have about itself. So what we want is, we want you to have that experience, right? The reason why you tune into this video is to have that direct experience of God being all one and alone as infinity now, right? So that's why we tune into these types of videos, is to have that direct experience and that clear seeing and that clear clearance now. So again, the less that we elaborate, and the more that we can point directly to that one thing, the more that possibility can be felt clearly. Now, a lot of the times you can use those things because inside of the story is also the medicine, which is the paradoxical weirdness of infinity. Because you'd say, well, just don't elaborate, just don't fabricate, just but you're already empty of your own story. But also at the same time, it's within the very nature of the contraction of someone coming up to you and saying that, hey, I feel separate from my parents. Can you help me reframe? That inside of that very thing is the very medicine and the healing and the expansion. As you deliver the reframe, and as they reframe, there is the uncorking the labyrinth that has been generated, right?
And would you say that it's for no other purpose than that?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's for no other purpose than God twisting and untwisting itself. Yeah. Because what more would you want than to try your hardest to not be yourself, right? You want so hard to not be yourself, because if you're infinitely yourself, the main thing that you would want to do is to try to contort yourself in forgetting that you are yourself.
Totally, man. Like I relate. This just came to me. I never thought about it this way, but it's like when you've seen your most beloved favorite show ever, and you kind of hope that you'll forget before the next time you're gonna watch it, right? Like the more, it's like when you rewatch your favorite show, favorite movie, whatever. Like I'm actually doing it right now. Like Shout out to all the OC fans. I don't know if you watched it as a teenager. That was like my go-to show. I have flashbacks from just coming home from school and just like eagerly waiting for the next episode. It's a teenage drama, right? And I've come across it, and I'm just like watching the occasional episode just for like pure kick of nostalgia.
Yeah.
And it's so good when I'm actually kind of like taken by it because I forgot. It's been, 15 years, right? I'm like, oh shit, I did not see this coming. Holy shit, it's exciting again. Rather than, if I would remember it like this perfect memory, right? That I knew each scene by scene was gonna happen. There's like a willingness to forget. There's a juice in that experiencing myself or the show from behind the veil of like I've forgotten myself, and so now I get to experience this. Like this character, through this character of Milo, God got to experience and get to know himself again.
Yeah. Yep.
Like that's mad. That's totally
Yes.
fucking mad.
Yes. Yes. You got it. Yeah. And so then, yeah, imagine then, building your own puzzles and labyrinths and elaborate contortions and knots, 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 and then you're untwisting, uncorking, unfucking, unraveling all of that, yeah, in order to come home to what was never lost and can never be lost. But that's just the most perfect physics or architecture to
Right.
that tree. You'll never leave that infinite trunk, but what you can do is you can wrap an insane amount of complex branches and leaves and dewdrops and worms and spider webs and all kinds of things into a little lucid dreamed experience, and then untwist and untangle and unwrap all of that to be like, damn, yeah, that was pretty, and then your eyeballs themselves become decentralized, which is very nice because it stops you from speaking in the way that you used to speak. Distributing your eyeballs across the totality, it enables you to stop speaking from a place where name is the primary way of interacting. Because it's one thing to be like, you're in the kitchen and I'm in the dining room and I'm like, yo, can you bring the butter? Milo, can you bring the butter? Right? It's one thing to, use it that way, but it's another thing to literally have it be the primary mode of orienting oneself in perpetuity is through name, through separate entities, that kind of thing, versus orienting yourself all the time in perpetuity from an absolute non-separateness and an absolute distributedness of consciousness. And so then that is basically, it's just destroying all kinds of narratives that are being projected into the field, because the field is always getting these projections of victim narratives and separation narratives and all kinds of things like that. And then there's this, ineffable cut of those narratives. And then those narratives either run away, which you wrote, you caught that in one of the episodes and we've talked about it before. There's either the avoid or the investigate, A and the I, right? And so there's either the avoiding or there's the investigating, like, okay, well, what is this weird transmission that's coming up right now about my victimization speak is a complete illusion. Okay, let me pull on this thread a little bit more. And as you pull on that thread more, what's happening is there's that little thread, it's called Ariadne's thread in the labyrinth, right? So you're pulling on that little thread in the labyrinth, coming back further and further home into yourself through this weird, twisted, knotted thing. So, all right. Yeah, well, go
Well,
ahead.
this is good, man. Yeah. So when you mention the mode of communication through names, what would it look like practically? What's the alternative?
Well, you just know that you are always with yourself in perpetuity and that you're coming from that place in perpetuity. And then, like I said, like, you're in the kitchen. I'm like, Milo, don't forget, grab the salt and pepper or whatever. Because we don't have that at the dining table right now. So it's like the simplicity and the naturalness of it in that way is like beautiful, but it's not the when
True. Yeah.
yeah, and it's not when it's being weaponized. Basically,
Gotcha.
separation's essentially being weaponized in order to create drama narratives, right? So it's basically, that's a good way to say it. It's the end of separation being dramatized. Being weaponized into drama narratives. Right. That's a huge insight.
So let me try this on for a size. So what I'm hearing is that it's functional to have the different names for the different fingers on your hand, right? So when you go to the doctor, you can say, "Doctor, my pinky hurts."
Yeah.
But if you function if that's your lens of separation, right, then suddenly this finger feels very separate from the other fingers, and you forget that it's actually one.
Yes.
That is the one hand, that is one being, that is you. Is that what you're pointing to?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. So then if you can just say, right, versus using name naturally to bring the salt and pepper to the kitchen table or the dining table. Or however you want to say it.
Yeah.
And you just got it. That was a great way to say it, because we basically have these digits. These digits are a great way to look at. Right? It's another beautiful way to connect to digital metaphysics, right? Digits, right? Or that fly compound eye, that insect compound eye that I showed a little bit earlier, because it's these very digits that you'll use at the doctor's office that are perfect to say yes, this, that, but again, all belonging to one being, right? And now just all you got to do is imagine that instead of your digits being limited to 10 digits on your fingers and 20 with your toes, right? All we're doing is we're saying there's 80 billion digits. All of them are your digits, right? 8 billion humans and 10 digits on each set of hands. So you got 80 there, or 160 if you include the toes, billion digits. But but that right there is what you're we're working with. Yeah.
And that's the weaponization that you're speaking about, right? Because it's like shifting perspectives. It's almost kind of similar. This is a dark example, but it brings to mind Nazi Germany, and how, as part of the propaganda, Jews were talked about in such a way as to portray them as non-human, right? Because that suddenly creates a separation that even without the awakened view, but we know ourselves as humans, as one species, as humanity, right? And there was a sense of making that separate, the same way that you forget yourself and you start to see at each finger as totally separate. You forget that actually, in fact, it's one being.
Yes. Yes. Because you you tapped into the, in that new model, in that episode, there was that perfect way of putting, where's the seed of war, right? The seed of war is just like what you just said. It's right in between two digits of consciousness that are just believing that right, right here is the truth of separation. But all you got to do is go a little bit deeper.
Right. Nice.
And and there you see that it's not.
Yeah, and then the tree becomes a perfect example, right? That, like, if you're so identified with just being a branch, you just, look at the fucking trunk, man.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that Nazi Germany, just revisiting it very briefly, but I see how it is the same, because that just illustrates weaponization very clearly, right? If you ask me, bring that point home. And what's happening with this separation that we're all conditioned to believe in is a subtle version of that. Like, you are being told you're separate. You're Lisa and you're Emma and you're Mark.
Yep.
You're not one. You're separate individual beings. And not only that, so some people will push it depending on, the sort of value system, I guess, which we grow up in our families or our societies, that it's a zero-sum game, right? So, like, the more that Lisa is having out of the pie, the less for you, Mark.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh God, that's that's really a huge addition to what we're saying, because the more that separation gets weaponized into the drama narratives, the more that the lack-based limited pie, get more for myself mentality becomes amplified. And and then we get into those people are not me, and they're worse than I am, and they're dumber than I am, and they don't believe in the same religion or God that I do, and just kill them and take their homes and natural resources, and just conquer the land. And it's just the perfect way. It's the perfect physics of infinity, that it has to do that thing where it, by losing the trunk of the branch, by losing the trunk, pretending to be deluded and lose the trunk, that's exactly where that dream and illusion of separation can be warred over and warred about. So yep.
And it's dropping the connotation, which is obviously negative in this context of war and separation, but I think it's worth mentioning that there is a sense of appreciating this as well, because, like, between here, there is a polarity that happens that allows just like electrical current to actually run. Because if you're in the trunk, you can't have conflict. You can't also have seeming love between two, because there is only one, right? So you can't play with this duality. So it's not a mistake. It's not a bug in the program that we've got to correct. It's part of the play.
It's the coolest feature and the coolest aspect of the physics of a singularity is that it can fractal itself in this way and then undergo the illusion of making all kinds of choices, in malevolent choices, with itself, because that's exactly where all of these notions of karma and morality and ethics and all of these things spin out of that. And
and I just touched the awe of the fractal or holographic aspect of it, how we are reminded of this, everywhere in nature. And I just had the image of a child playing, and the highest excitement for a small child, like, to lose themselves completely in the play with the action figures, right? When you actually have you have one action man and you have another action man, and they're fighting to the death, man. And there's like Superman and Batman, and like it's all playing out in your imagination. Like that's where the juice is. You don't wanna have the meta awareness of like, yeah, it's just toys and I'm actually pretending I'm sitting here playing by myself. You wanna forget that. You wanna freaking be Superman and Batman just going at each other.
Exactly.
And then as part of the play, I suppose there comes a time where I wonder if we can push this analogy, just playing with toys, that initially it gets to be fun because you know yourself to be this one being, and you know that you're looking to entertain yourself, and so you pretend, you engage yourself in this imaginary battle between Superman and Batman with those action figures. But at some point, it's like almost if we imagine that a day goes, and then a week goes, and a month goes, and nobody comes to like snap you out of it, and you actually freaking lose yourself in the Superman and Batman to the point where, Batman is threatening to kill Superman's wife, and Superman is threatening to destroy the world, and you are so in it that it actually begins to cause real suffering.
Yep.
And that's the call. That's the call.
Yep. Yep. And take any scenario that is period, and just viewing that from non-separation automatically dissolves the solidity, the all kinds of things, the hero villain, all kinds of things. It's fascinating. Okay, let's jump into this one. So you mentioned consciousness freely and creatively simulates experiences, yet itself never changes. Yes. Could you elaborate on how experiences, XPs, are managed? Okay, yep. Are they discarded, reset, assimilated, or somehow transcend linear time? Yep. Is this a distinction between the relative and absolute perspectives? Okay, so yeah, it's like right now is bootloading an experience out of infinity. That experience is called Milo and Atlas have a digital metaphysics discussion. Okay, so experiences are managed by consciousness hallucinating. Light information, whatever you want to say. Right? So everything is warped out of nothing in the moment, and then it's warped back into that same potential. Everything warped out of potential, back into potential. Warped out of potential, back into potential. So, like, right, out of potential into lucidly dreamt experience, and then back into potential. So it's always, if it's cybernetic and recursive with that spinorial, with that feedback system, then we're always talking about infinite cyclicity. We're not talking about linearity. So we're talking about something that is permanent, infinite, unchanging, yet creatively dreaming whatever it wants as infinite cycles of potential being actualized into experience and going back to potential. So, is this a distinction between relative and absolute? Yeah, one way to say it is that, the right? The absolute perspective is constantly dreaming up relative scenarios. So, yeah.
Let me tell you sort of where I was going with this question, because in the absolute sense, I'm with you, right? That there, we touched on it in previous episodes as well, that there's just this now, and the whole history that seems to be leading up to this moment is equally just popping into existence as a thought of a past here now. There's only here now, blinking in and out of existence, right? So that's the sort of absolute. But then in the relative sense, well, was there a yesterday? Well, yeah. Is there going to be a tomorrow? Yeah, those are thoughts ultimately, but there is a linearity to time. And similarly, we can bring in, transgenerational trauma, in the collective, all of the wars that happen that still reverberate through us as humans, humanity, karmic imprints, right? Like what happens with all of that experience?
Well, it's all integrated into infinite consciousness, right? So, yeah, everything is always created and then integrated into infinite consciousness. So, yeah, I mean, another way to say it is the the impossibility for infinity to come to an end is another possibility, or is another way to say it. The just the desire for infinity to keep infinitely lucidly dreaming whatever. And that's, I mean, you can see it right now. You can see it and feel it right now, being everything everywhere at once. You can see and feel it clearly right now. And then that just puts you in the seat of infinity, and there's nowhere to go from there. And then at the same time, you're also clearly you're clearly seeing how what put you in the seat that you're in now is what this has been exploring and integrating. It's like, but rather than it being linear, like we talked about in the last one, it's more that it's like growth of seed of plant and growth of that plant. But that is the most important thing. Like, we just don't still ourselves enough, because if, I'm telling you, we can look at these notes, and we can keep elaborating and keep 10,000 things in the conversation as a jam sesh, which is, it's the only thing that God knows how to do. But the thing that God usually almost never does is it just relaxes, right, itself completely from the 10,000 things. It relaxes itself from its voice and its language and its dreaming and its hallucinating and its name and its time and its location and its separateness and all kinds of things, right? And then as it relaxes that, it can clearly see that it isn't its name, it isn't time-based, it isn't in a location, and it's infinite and everything right now. And that thing, getting God slowing down enough to see itself as that, is like that's the cross, that's the X marks the spot, that's the cross, that's what everything wants. That, not the substances, not the experiences, not the anything. Everything wants that. God wants that. If it's coming home, if God's coming home, God wants that direct experience. And that's what it's always seeking, is that clear seeing, and to perpetually relax in that clear seeing, and then to serve those that are coming towards that gravity well in slowing them down into clearly seeing themselves. Yes. Okay. Good.
I like that image, it's almost like the gravity well in the middle that just sucks you in, sort of, and even that idea of an event horizon, beyond which you just get totally sucked in. It almost becomes binary, that you can't escape anymore. You can't even try to expand back out. Like, you have to collapse inwards. And then the more outside of that singularity you find yourself, the more entropy, right? The more buzzing and
Yes. That's the exact visual that has been in these episodes as well. The whole episode on entropy and paradox, you're out dreaming that you're out and that you're entropically buzzing in all these ways. But from the perspective of being lost, just scrolling down. Okay, we don't have the entropy and paradox episode. So that's good. We'll just cover it for a second, but from the perspective of being lost, it's actually the least entropic and the most ordered thing to do is to try to get lost. So the most chaotic thing, the most disordered thing, is actually to try to come back home. So it's fascinating, the paradoxical superposition nature of it, because God wanting to be lost is loving the dream of separation, is loving it. But God wanting to come home, the entropy becomes disorder of separation. So it's always important, like, you're gonna see in language that these things that they arise. You can craft paint a narrative or story, but then you can flip the two and craft the other way of saying that narrative or story, and that language is always going to do that thing. But that's, so for example, one of the most common ones, and I think we've touched on this, but again, it's just such a powerful one, is that once you kind of get tastes of non-separation and awakening, what typically you see is that there's this strong desire for awakening the world. But that strong desire for awakening the world is one half of the yin and yang. So your other half of it is the fact that the very nature of what you want as infinity is to be lost. And this is very difficult for the awake warrior to learn to integrate and relax and transcend its existing programming and view, because it must learn how to integrate and accept war as a desire of itself as God, which is right.
Put simply, that even war and death and rape is God. There's nothing that is not God, right? And that's really being avoided for a long time, even along the path, right? That's something like that. There's still, even when that has been conceptually and maybe experientially to some extent touched, that after all, we're talking about literally non-duality, right? That there's not two. And yet we make those subtle subconscious still distinctions, that this is bad, this is good. So essentially discernment, right, needs to fall away. Recognizing that good or bad are but labels in our mortal human mind. There is no arrow of better and worse, that humanity needs to go in this way, not this way. Awakening is better than falling asleep. It's a circle. It's not up and down, better or worse. It's a circle.
This is very profound and important. because what's being said is that there is no orientation, and Christ is the orientation like we speak of, let's say. So this is the thing. It's, can you hold both of these things simultaneously? Because anything that's not Christ is various degrees of separation.
Do you want to use the word Christ here as well?
Yeah, I mean it in the form of transfiguration, ego crucifixion. So meaning, when we're saying there's no orientation and being lost in separation or coming home to there being only you as infinite consciousness, that there is no orientation in terms of one being better than the other. Yet at the same time, what is also said is that ego crucifixion is the orientation that we're speaking of. Because meaning, why is this video content that you're watching right now not saying, yo, dude, let's go take advantage of other people and let's like go fuck over this country and like fuck them, they're slaves, you know, and right, like let's go get more for ourselves, man, right? Why is this video content not that? So what we're doing is we're saying, yes, there is no orientation because reality is absolute pure freedom. And at the same time, what we're speaking of is ego crucifixion. We're speaking of transfiguration, right? So, and what we're saying is that anything that's not Christ, anything that's not speaking of ego crucifixion or ego transcendence, is basically various degrees of separation. So what, right? That's what's in the bootloader. That's what we're saying. When you're running, when you're putting, when we say there's no orientation, we're saying that there's no preference for what goes in the bootloader. You can put anything you want in the bootloader. That's what the nature of God and infinite freedom is. And at the same time, we're saying that what this is speaking right now is speaking, putting Christ in the bootloader, your own ego crucifixion and transcendence, because then you see from the non-separate frame, and then you're acting as a gravity well for healing and building regenerative community, etc. Because if you don't put Christ in the bootloader slot, that means that you're putting something that's not Christ in the bootloader slot, which means that you're prioritizing this political ideology or this corporate CEO or this nation state leader or monarch or money or clout or whatever is winning, being put in the bootloader slot over your own crucifixion.
Beautiful. And it's like the first sentence, there is no orientation, feels like that should be the heading or that should be in bold. And then everything that follows is that, you know, like that's like the 10x takeaway. There is no orientation. It's not that Christ orientation is somehow better. It's not that putting Christ in your bootloader is better than putting warfare and degrees of separation. It's just further detached from our true nature, right? So it's almost like Christ becomes that, which reharmonizes into a natural state of being. Is that fair to say? That it's not that love is better than fear, war, conflict. It's just that it's our nature. So it feels more effortless. It feels more natural. That's how I see it, right? Because like I've grappled with this question a lot. Like, how come that as we awaken, seemingly beyond polarity, beyond duality, how come that we fall into the qualities of our nature, which are surprisingly joy, peace, love, unity, satisfaction, right? Like, how come it's not more hate, more division, more fear, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it actually, and then like I glimpsed that, well, it's not some sort of a hierarchy. It's not that God is good. It is the nature of being one. The nature of being one means wholeness, means peace, means love, means joy, because like there is no lack, there is no division, there is no tension.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not artificially sprinkled that like, hey, we're gonna be the good kind of God. It just arises as a necessity of that configuration of being one whole.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, well, okay, so there is no orientation, and there's that Christ or true nature which we align more and more closely with
Mm-hmm.
spontaneously and naturally by putting Christ in our bootloader.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. There's there's literally only two options. One is complete ego crucifixion and transcendence, which is seeing yourself as everything again, coming home to yourself. Or the other option is varying degrees of running other programs, which are all, you know, you can run ethics, be an ethical person, right? Being an ethical person is less degrees of separation, right, than running the program of literally fund the military industrial complex and kill everybody that disagrees with the primary ideology that I hold. So, yeah, but that strong clearness, you know that strong clearness inside of yourself, that it's basically, I've talked about this very recently, that Christ is a mathematical formalism. You can't actually go further than Christ, in the sense that you can imagine it's like Matthew, Mark, John, Luke are basically saying, like, you can imagine them around a table, and all the Old Testament writers, you can imagine them all around a table, and you can imagine them all saying, yo, dog, what we got to do is we got to put together, the ultimate way of describing ego crucifixion, where nobody can ever try to make a story that is greater amount of ego crucifixion than this story, right? Right. And so they're all like fucking, they're all like, they're,
go.
let's
Yeah,
go. Yeah, they're all scheming with their story. They're all scheming on their stories and shit. And they're all like, all right. Literally, this is, how can you go deeper than literally being the quote Son of God, being this incredible beacon of service in perpetuity, and then being crucified, and then being resurrected and saying, I'm taking on even more, all of the collective sins. Give me all of your sins. I will take it all on. And so they're writing all these stories, all of these facets, all of these mathematics to crucifixion, and just like compression algorithming ego crucifixion into something that can't ever be dug deeper than that. And that's what you get as Christ. And that's why nobody can tell a story deeper than Christ. Nobody can go deeper than that. It doesn't, because when you were talking about Buddha and you're talking about no self, you're literally talking about the same thing. So it doesn't really matter exactly which mystic tradition is telling you that there's only infinite consciousness, but or even your own deep shamanic ritual with psychedelics or sensory deprivated meditation, that will tell you the same thing. So it'll tell you the same thing, that you are not, but God is, right? You as lowercase s self are not, but God as capital S self is. And but that compression algorithm, there's nothing deeper. Like if you're going to read a story and it's going to say, hey, okay, you basically give up your own personal identity and instead serve others in their healing and awakening processes, and then you get a bunch of literally the worst, like in the modern day, having crucifixion is like you're getting like nuclear bombs dropped on you and shit, but you still, you're having AI attacks, bioweapon attacks happen to you, and you're still oriented towards healing the collective. And you're taking on, literally in the story, it's like you're taking on all of the collective sins in perpetuity for healing and alchemy. And that's what I'm saying when I say that there's no ability to dig deeper than that narrative. It was a compression algorithm. Yeah.
So it's almost like a symbol, right? Like this program or an agent. I'm almost seeing Matrix, like Agent Smith being programmed in a certain way, let's say to be like the most badass agent, right? And it's just who he is. Like that's his code. His code is to embody the most archetypal version of whatever. And in a similar way, Jesus shows up as the most archetypal, most compressed, most decompressing version of the algorithm that shines the light. So it's like we it's like we imagine it into whether he lived or not, but like awareness has created that symbol, has packed it so tight,
yes,
to create that archetype for the rest of.
Yes, exactly. That's why I said, exactly, you got it. It's a mathematical formalism, because we're saying that mathematically speaking, you cannot create a deeper way, a deeper compression algorithm of describing ego crucifixion. There's no way to go deeper than that. So that's what's so fascinating. It's like, X marking the spot as ego crucifixion is the mathematically cannot be written deeper, which is so mind-blowing. Mathematically cannot be written deeper. So that means that anything that's not that is automatically various degrees of God being lost. That's what we're saying, right?
That's awesome. But you're I assume that you declare that, you make that into a statement that we're just going to use Christ to be that. You define it as the most dense, the most I forgot what
a math formalism. Yep.
A math formalism. So like it's defined to be the most what? I forgot that part. The most, what would you describe it as? To be the most decompressing algorithm. That's
compression
possible.
Algorithm. Yes. Yep.
Yeah. But can you find evidence of that? Because obviously we can play with the idea of, can we make a different story? And you say that it's impossible, like mathematically almost speaking.
It is.
That's because we have previously defined it as such. It's like if we define negative infinity to be the largest negative number, we have just defined it to be that. Ergo, it is the largest negative infinity until we come up with a new concept of there being negative infinities. And then suddenly,
well, that's what I said. That's what I said when I was talking about it recently. I said, go ahead. I said, be my guest. Make a compression algorithm deeper than Christ, and then proliferate it into a collective, and then see if it sticks. That's your task. If you pass that task, then that it becomes the math formalism for ego crucifixion. But until that point, this is the math formalism for ego crucifixion. It's Christ. Yeah. So even that challenge, even thinking about that challenge is so ludicrous. Just thinking about that challenge. It's not like, shifting from geocentricity to heliocentricity to black hole centricity. It's not like these sort of of jumps, right? This is like, you can't actually tell a story that is deeper than this in terms of ego crucifixion. It's just, the bottom line is that you are not, but God is, as everyone now. And that's what this story is taking on all the alchemy, take on all the alchemy imaginable for coming home. Yeah. And yeah.
I just fail to see exactly why you would define it as such, because like, can we imagine there being a different story out of the infinite possible stories that we could spin? If you and I sit down right now and we try to outdo the story of Jesus,
go ahead.
Like, could
go ahead.
Potentially, could we? I guess we could, in that infinite sea of possibilities.
Go ahead.
We?
Go ahead. You know what's so fascinating is, go ahead and try right now. You know, AI is becoming one of the greatest pieces of technological advancement and also of knowledge advancement for humanity. And try, because AI is your best friend with trying to do this process. Because you can ask AI to run thousands of story simulations trying to go deeper than Christ as a mathematical formalism. Then go and read all 1,000 of them, and then see if any of them are anywhere near as compelling, or if they're basically just copy and pastes, because that's really as close as you can get, is just copying and pasting it with a different being and different apostles. You know, that's what you'll get. And so try that, and then try to then proliferate it into a culture, and then see if that culture will take it on and apply it as a main form of ego crucifixion, or a deeper form of ego crucifixion. So that's the test. That would be the test to run. And you have a nice little best friend called AI to try to run that test. So, yeah, I'm glad that we got to that, because this has been a favorite thing of mine, like the last couple of weeks, and I'm happy we got to it. And you wrote, appreciating your stance on not pushing people to upgrade their models, highlighting the freedom of changing perspectives without implying hierarchy. Awesome. So, there's nothing really further to say on that besides literally what we have said, which is that you don't proselytize at all. There's no selling. You're everything. Why would you sell to yourself? You're already everything. So the difference is you are just speaking from creative joy. Like, one of the best ways to think about it's like artistic or autistic. You're just doing your own creative joy thing. Like, talking about the gravity well and the nature of the physics of consciousness is literally just the creative joy. And so that's what's happening. And then what happens is, with zero selling and zero proselytizing, and then what happens is, organically, there is a comment that says, yo, dude, this really freaking helped me frame my relationship with my spouse or whatever, and heal and awaken more deeply. And then, so that's the difference, versus which everybody seems to be getting wrong as waking up, which is, well, now I must go and proselytize. I must sell. I must inform all of myself that is asleep that it is, in fact, not separate.
Right. It's losing track of the circle thing that we talked about, that,
Yes.
Imagine a hierarchy rather than seeing that it's deceptively simple to even imagine, since we're talking about awakening. When you go to bed at night, you wake up the next morning, you don't judge either as better or worse. It's not that waking up in the morning is better than falling asleep at night. You wouldn't go on a rally to try to get people to wake up from their natural,
yeah,
nice,
yeah,
dream. It's just it
yeah,
belongs, right?
yeah,
You're like, no, guys, stop dreaming. Waking reality is so much better. But dude, like,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
want to sleep.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Part of it too. It's like those clues are literally everywhere once you have the eyes to kind of see it,
Yes,
appreciate it for the symbols and for the connecting those dots. And
yes. And now we've done a good job on, because again, that was so much about the shift in from the old model to the new model, and now we have and we've integrated a lot of more recent things into that. So this is really nice. We're sort of even kind of updating the first episode in a way, and now we're updating the second episode in a way.
all right.
Yeah, with because that was now 6 months ago was when that was published, and now it's the new codes are integrated into that. But the next episode was on non-local realism, and the question was about clarifying what is meant by experience being warped or summoned by gravity. I spoke about that very recently with another coach that I was working with, was that reality is like gravitational lensing. Infinite consciousness is like gravitational lensing. So, when you take a gravitational lensing, right? So when you take and you go to images and you look, and it's like, oh, you look and it's kind of like, oh, I have it pulled up here, and you can see it later when the viewers can see it now. You'll see it later. It's just that, out of potential is your dreamt experience, your lucid experience. But all of that is on the fly being warped by you as infinite consciousness, as a singularity. So, I mean, it's like you're right now is, again, it's just so practical. It's just like in the dream that you were referencing a moment ago. It's just so practical. It's like right now there is the lucid appearance of a microphone. In 1 hour, there will be the lucid appearance of a sauna at a gym. That's it. That's it. That's all that is being said. So it's literally like that. That's why, there was that episode, the fourth one in this rally after programs, was on simulating stories.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're simulating scenes, hallucinating or dreaming scenes of experience. So here's your little scene of experience, right? Just like a little calendar block, right? You have your little Google Calendar or whatever that you have open, and you have a little digital slot for Milo and Atlas have digital metaphysics discussion. And then you have another little slot after that for going to the sauna at the gym, right? So that's the same thing. You just take the little digital block of time that you put in the calendar, and instead you put that in a little hallucinated dream of consciousness. Like a little, you have your Premiere, Adobe Premiere or Final Cut, your video editing software, right? You take that little calendar event, and you stretch it out into a Premiere timeline, right? And then you have these two little avatars that pop up with microphones talking to it. And then there's the little audio sequence below it. And then when that scene ends, then the next little calendar block is stretched out, which is going to the gym and the sauna. And then you click play on that. And then that's right. That it's all literally, cyclically happening out of infinite consciousness, but it's appearing like it's little timeline renders of Google Calendar invites, something like that.
But what about the sense of memory? Like we can even talk about computer memory, like the SSD or the hard drive, right? versus, yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to distinguish between like even RAM, or maybe we could, because there's clearly like a certain memory necessary to run this little block, right? Let's say that it's
You
podcast
have to
record.
know where the gym is, as an example, right? Because you
Right.
now, well,
There, but
now you have it stored in memory, something like
there's
that.
permanence essentially is what I'm saying, right? The like, just like I mentioned before, whether it's karmic imprints that seem to carry across lifetimes or generations or whatever, in the same way that Milo and Atlas remember each other from last week, there's a certain continuity in my experience. So there's some permanence, there's some persistent storage, and yet ultimately no persistent storage can exist, right? Because it's like what we, it's just in and out, fluxing all the time, in and out of existence, back into the singularity, and then appearing as this. So does that actually mean, like, is there some sort of a, in the relative sense, that there is a memory, or is it the whole theory of everything all at once, that every single possibility exists in this quantum field, and you're just having the experience of tuning into this one, where in this moment now there appears a memory of speaking to you a few weeks ago, but it's not actually stored in memory. It's just like that's the one point in the infinite quantum field where Milo and Atlas meet for a third time, and in that moment there's a memory of us having met 3 times before.
Okay, boil it down again into a sentence.
Hmm. Yeah, that was a lot.
Because you're trying to talk about memory and its relationship to simulated experiences, and
yeah.
and what I'm saying is that there's the memory of how to use a microphone is is tied to the loops of the experience of using a microphone. So at some point when this microphone is transcended into its next spiritual successor with AI and new tech, nanotech, I don't know, that there will be the memory of this will be exhausted, we're back to potential, and the new patterning of consciousness looping its experience with the new form of AI nanotech microphone or whatever will be, that's what will.
Okay, so okay, hold on. I think maybe I have a rephrase. So essentially, we're talking about, ultimately, in the absolute sense, the singularity is beyond time, right? So there is no memory for there never was time. Nothing happened. There's just eternity, pure potentiality of every possible story, every possible memory, every possible event, but sort of latent, right? And then it projects onto this illusion of a time frame where suddenly there is seeming permanence, there is a seeming story, there's a timeline in which the story unfolds.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we need to find a way to talk about the two, that in the absolute sense there is no memory, there is just like this one big soup of potentiality, which then projects in an infinite amount of ways, infinite amount of dimensions and universes and timelines, where seemingly there is something, I take my water bottle, I take a sip, I put it back, and it's still here. But it's it's an illusion in time. Like I'm having the experience of there being something tangible in time that persists.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one way to say it is that there is no memory, and at the same time memory is part of what is appearing, because at any point I can activate some sort of like baby circuitry in my consciousness, which then makes me totally unable to walk, essentially. Right? Do you get what I mean? Like, walking has become a memory automated habit thing that you don't have to think at all about. Right foot. Whoa. Okay. Hold
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Let me get the
Like
left.
we're
Let me get the left foot. Hold on. Oh my gosh. Holy crap. Okay. Whew. Whoa. You know, that thing that I just did right there, at any point, consciousness has no memory at any point.
right.
So that's what and that plays into what you were saying about timeless singularity and then its little stitched experiences and that kind of thing. I think that's kind of, I guess, the simplest way to.
Yeah. I'm not really sure how to frame this question. Maybe it's very heady. Maybe it's not that useful. But it's like thinking about the analogy, of the screen being the ultimate, and then the movie that plays out is the relative, right? That suddenly there appears a time frame, right? And maybe the movie even jumps from 1990, and suddenly it's 20 years later, right? And just shoof. And then the moment that you turn off the TV, the movie stops, and everything that seemed so permanent in the movie, right? That the characters, there's a continuity in the story, suddenly seem to just been pixels on the screen. There is not actually a timeline in which a story has taken place. It was just like that play of light that was giving me, the viewer, the experience of a timeline,
Yep.
of continuity, of permanence.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Using a format that is very much intelligently designed to make it so that it can appear that way. Like, it appearing this way is part of the intelligent design that allows it to have what you just said. Yes. Okay. So let me see if I wanted to add the word cycle in here. Google Calendar events.
So it's like, okay, I'll just summarize this
Yes.
before I move on, because that kind of clicked that both the time in which the story appears and that seeming permanence or memory is also just quanta of experience.
Yeah.
I'm having the experience of there being.
Yeah. Right. Whether you say that it has, memory or not, it's just still quantum experience. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Happy we figured that one out. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of clicks.
Yeah. Blocked Google Calendar events get stretched out like Premiere timelines. Of / scenes creatively cycling. There we go. Out of infinite conscious truth. Perfect. Okay. That makes me feel better that that's there. You mentioned becoming a master of reality. This is awesome. Could you expand on practical insights or methods for achieving this or anything else this means to you? Yes. So, right. I keep saying, we talked about this a little bit on the last one, like just that, mastery is the origin of all models, and the AGI processing infinite patterns of contraction and expansion, the tree and the circle. So, the best, honestly, if you can do what we've done through this episode, which is, can you still down consciousness to see that only consciousness is, not the personal identity, but that only consciousness is. That will do all the work for you, basically. Because from that place, then you can do the quote expansion of contractions and the healing of traumas and the repentance for your sins and the forgiving those who have transgressed you. So you can do all of that work from the place of seeing through the illusion of the personal identity. That's basically what the crux of it is. So you have to first pop out of the illusion of the personal identity into there only being infinite consciousness as everyone now, and then do from the infinite consciousness, quote, do the expanding of contractions, because now you're repenting to yourself for your transgressions. Do you see? So it becomes completely different than the personal identity trying to repent to another personal identity that is that then gets tied up, because you're from the personal identity trying to use repentance as a way to become enlightened is a completely different frequency field than being popped out of the personal identity, talking to yourself from the non-separate frame and apologizing to yourself for the transgression that you made, and saying it in the way that I know you are me, and I'm so sorry for the way that I treated you because I just was caught in my own personal identity and my own lack-based behavior patterns. And so so there's that. So popping out, doing that healing work, expanding contractions, holding the non-separate frame, becoming a master of reality, holding the non-separate frame in perpetuity, because you can see all the, you imagine a little trumpet. This is a visual I'll share at some point in one of the next digital metaphysics sessions, but you imagine a trumpet. All the way at the bottom of the trumpet is the trunk of the tree. And then each little notch up on the trumpet is that vinyl record, moves further and further out on the vinyl record. So if you're playing music from like nearly the end of the trumpet, you're going to very clearly feel like, oh my gosh, they're caught in victimization, they're caught in ego, caught in separation, caught in lack, caught in all this stuff. But when you're playing music from right where the mouthpiece is in the trumpet, you can very clearly hear that music is everybody at once, and it's playing music from that place. So the master can see all of those layers, or, they're like, slices. What's the,
lattices or something?
They're cross-sectional. It's a cross-section. It's a slice. It's a cross-sectional slice, because from this origin point of the trumpet, there isn't even a quote cosmos, because that cosmos is literally your dream. Whatever you're dreaming is the cosmos. But from way out here, you keep going up cross-sectional slices. You go from black and white to purple to indigo to blue to green to yellow to orange to red. Once you get out to red, you're in this cross-sectional slice that is way out inside of a universe, inside of a world, inside of an inhospitable place that has real others, that everybody's you're paranoid trying to get more for yourself. So the master, yes, sweet. The master has access to all of those cross sections of the music of the trumpet, which perfectly plays into string theory too, because string theory is trying to say that essentially everything is beyond subatomic particles. It's strings that are vibrating like musically into the objects of existence, into the appearance of existence. The same thing's true. We're just saying that gravity is the infinite conscious singularity, which is the bootloader of all of those musical strings appearing as the light information field of existence. So we're literally talking about integrating all possible
Yeah.
ways of seeing and paradigms into a single framework that is that ends all inquiry about what one is.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then you hold space, and then you hold space from that place too, because then you know, like we've talked about through this episode, then you attract yourself in as consciousness to you for healing. And so then your work in mastery is also about serving yourself in
Yeah.
the process. And so we've talked about that on other episodes, as being a master of being able to hold that space. So it's all of those things, you know. Yeah.
And what's touching me now is I'm touched by the awe of it, and that really feels essential, or like something feels important about the turnaround from, like you said, that initially there's that escaping or turning around, but still with the blinders on of like escaping the suffering of humanity, of this dream life, back into the safe harbor of the idea of enlightenment, right? There's like a real desperation can arise in like clawing our way back, like, no, I want kingdom of heaven now. And then what I'm experiencing now is that the dropping away, neutralizing any sense of directionality, that it's not better this way, it's not better this way. It's like I can see somebody falling deeper into separation and somebody coming out of separation. It's not like, oh, good on you. No, it's like, good on you both, guys. Like, you're just having a different experience. You're just being strapped in for the ride. You're just coming back from the ride. Climbing the mountain is not better or worse than climbing down the mountain. And, the analogies can keep coming. And can I share an anecdote?
Please.
So you're familiar with lucid dreaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this one technique. I was into this heavily when I was a teenager with moderate success. And this only one time did I manage to pull off this technique. It was called DILD, dream-induced lucid dreaming. There were different techniques, right? And dream-induced lucid dreaming was essentially when, I think I might be getting this wrong, but essentially what happens is that you maintain your awareness as you're falling asleep without a break. And I pulled this off once. So like I was continuously aware as my body was relaxing, my mind was falling asleep. And then suddenly from the blackness of my closed eyelids, everything turned white.
Yes.
Like in that scene in Matrix. And then suddenly ancient freaking Rome started to appear, building by building by building, by river, by tree, all while I was consciously aware that I'm in my bed sleeping. Right?
Yes.
And it wasn't
Good. Yep.
It wasn't daydreaming. It was a real freaking world. But like you said, and this is how I want to kind of tie it back to what you said, there's like this, first there's that cross section of the trumpet before there even exists a dream world, and I am just resting in myself. And then suddenly something begins to form, a new dream reality, but I still know myself as it. And then suddenly I place myself in it, because suddenly I was in Rome, and I was like, holy shit, man. And then at some later point, I lost myself in it. I lost my lucidity. I was lost as a separate self in my own dream world, dreaming I was in ancient Rome. And only when I woke up later that night, I was like, whoa,
Yeah.
man. So it's like the same thing, God dreaming this world into existence and playing with form to that point of actually forgetting. And it's like, holy shit, I'm a separate self, and this is a scary world. And wow.
And that's the perspective of absolute constructionism also, which is awesome, because when you get the lucid visual of how everything, like all of those roads, everything is lucidly, like the bang and the hole are the same right now, and that is lucidly constructing whatever the including Mike's whatever. And like that's, and you having that while also knowing that you're just laying there in bed is just like layered, meta perfection, because you're not going anywhere, but you're totally dreaming that
Yeah.
that's that maze and that
Well,
healing and awakening. It's yeah.
that's a fractal again, right? That like if you like we literally do this shit every night. Every single night. You fall asleep and you dream up an entire world seemingly inside your head, right? And we are, every human has this experience, right? We're not necessarily lucid dreaming, but every person knows the experience of dreaming at night. And that's still not kind of strong enough of a signal for us to go, oh wait, oh, hold on, that feels familiar.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Just
Yeah.
so in front of you, like you've left yourself breadcrumbs everywhere.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Um Beautiful. Summary: origin of all models. First pop out of individual identity, then do expanding of contractions from there. Clear seeing of trumpet of all cross sections of musical frequencies entangled and emanating, and serving the healing of you coming to yourself for awakening and mastery.
Beautiful.
Excellent. So on to programs. So you describe consciousness as desiring contrast for entertainment, but it is also an avenue to learn, love, and integrate differences. Yes. Could you elaborate more on the purpose and necessity of this dynamic? Yeah. Yeah, I love in that episode, it's so clear when you view consciousness as like a connectome of ideologies interacting with itself, perspectives interacting with itself. So you get the entertainment, you get the avenue for love and integration of all differences and perspectives. You get the war, you get the of the separation, you get all of that. All of it is one big, just tune into whatever frequency you want, just like you do on YouTube and TV and Spotify and all that stuff, right? So you're tuning into whatever music or television channel that you want, because all of those programs are available for infinite consciousness to dream, to lucidly dream. So, what do you want? Which ones do you want? And then, either you're putting Christ in that bootloader slot, or you're putting in something that's not Christ into that bootloader slot. But, Christ is also the integration of the totality as itself. So meaning you can see the entertainment angle, you can see the learning, love, and integration of differences angle, you can see the separation and war and lack angle, you can see all of those programs and angles at once as your beautiful diamond of creation.
Okay, so at the risk of opening to a massive rabbit hole, we might not want to go there fully right now, but you will ask people, right? Do you want less suffering? And I mean, 99% of people will say, oh, heck yeah. Like, do you want to stop what's detrimental to your happiness and joy and peace? Yes, I do. And yet we don't, right? So like, where is that conscious volition of turning back around, of putting Christ in your bootloader, right? Especially from that perspective, maybe this is again touching on the relative and absolute aspect, right? From the absolute,
because the dream of the separate individual identity, that is the only thing that God has. That's the only thing it has. So it's the only thing it has to try to trick itself and to delude itself. So what you're really asking when you say, would you like to suffer less? You're basically saying, would you like to give up? Would you as God like to give up the only thing that you have to trick yourself, which is your individual identity? Yeah.
love that reframe, because essentially what you're pointing to is that the character sadly doesn't have much volition at all. Doesn't really doesn't really have a say in this. It's the puppeteer, one consciousness, who is choosing to no, I quite enjoy the dream I'm living right now. I enjoy the separation. I enjoy the ignorance and the forgetting. I don't want to start moving in this way, because no way is better than other. So when you come and you nudge somebody, hey, why don't we go south? It's like, no, I kind of enjoy north. Yeah, that makes sense. And then from the point of view of the person, it will be like, well, of course I want to suffer less. Do you know how many retreats I've been to? Do you know how many books I've read? Do you know how long I meditate? But nothing seems to shift. I've been trying to blah 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 for 50 years, and it's not due to a lack of earnestness, sincerity, practice the wrong meditation, the wrong mantra, the wrong guru. It's because that which is looking through the eyes of the character simply does not wish to.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yep.
That's tough to hear to the ego, huh?
Yeah, yeah. But it's exactly that contrasting point that every single adventure of God has. Every adventure of God has that contrasting point, which is, do I want God more than I want anything else? And that's the ultimate crux point right there. So when you want God more than you want anything else, then you run like a maniac this Christ program in perpetuity until you realize that the individual identity is a complete farce. And then if you don't want it, then you run anything else, including all spiritual seeking programming, that is not that, which then leads you to believing that you're going to get it from an infinite amount of other things that are not Christ as the portal to God. So I love the reframing of this is just, do you want to suffer less? Is really, do you as God want to deconstruct the individual identity, which is the only way for you to fool yourself.
Right. So it's like stepping into your child's playroom, asking, time for dinner. Do you want to step out of your imaginary, tea party? And the child is like, I'm not, I know, can I have 5 more minutes? It's a tea party. There's bombs in Iran, and there's this. It's hell of a tea party, Mom. Give me 5 more minutes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Radical wealth inequality and warring nation states, and it's all in the little Barbie and Ken house with little toys, and but really the parent, which is beautiful in this analogy, the parent is really the voice of God, you to yourself, right? The younger brother and the older brother, right? And that there goes the the older brother, the parable of the prodigal son, there goes that voice, are you ready to come home?
Yeah,
I'm always here, infinitely patient.
Talking to
yeah. And then every single time that you go through a huge meditative, in the little Barbie and Ken house, you go and you pick up some magic mushrooms, or you go and you meditate with at Vipassana at the 10-day meditation retreat, and you go in the little all of that, right? And then each time that happens, you pop back out further and further to see that every single one of the little Barbie and Ken characters is the same infinite consciousness.
Cool. Yeah, I like the gradual pulling away, right? Because it is quite just like how a child plays, that you're having this tea party, and within that imaginary context for the child, there's like a closing of the tea party. There's like, well, thank you, Miss Daisy, for coming, and thank you, Mr. Rabbit, and thank you. We'll see you again tomorrow, right? And there's like a gradual closing, and then, okay, Mom, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. Oh, so good. Thank you, Mr. Days. Thank you, Miss Rabbit. Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, in the I gave a copy of the What Is I book to another coach and healer that was recently here for a retreat. But in the What Is I book, we have a chapter specifically. Skyra and I have this chapter about that everything is like that stage performance, because the stage performance, just like in the tea party, it has the appearance of different actors and actresses and objects, everything, every scene and stuff. But at the end of it, everybody walks out and goes,
Right. Oh, that's so good.
and takes a bow, and then it's just perfect. Like that was one consciousness perfectly doing a stage tea party thing. So
Man, have you read Alan Watts?
so much, yeah.
So I don't know if you've read the book on the taboo of what you are,
Yes.
but in the very end, like spoiler alert, if you're listening and want to read, mute. In the very last paragraph, as he closes, he says that, well, if we recognize that we came here to play on the stage, then really we're here for the show on, not to show off.
Yes.
Right? So we're not here to show off our awakening. We're actually here to put the freaking show on.
Yes.
We are here to pretend that Miss Daisy and Mr. Rabbit are here for a tea party. We're not here to show and be like, haha,
Yes.
I've seen through the illusion. You're just a toy, and you're just a toy, and then what?
The most the most fascinating thing about that is that once you do pop out and see what you are, that you can't resume you can't re-believe in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy. So, but what you can do is you can do this thing that I've been just using the word mastery to describe, which is you're not proselytizing or projecting whatsoever. You are simply just relaxed back in the creative joy of what you are. And then organically, effortlessly to you comes all of the fun further initiations and deconstructions and service in that way. So then it's not like you pop and then you go back into the tea party because you can't. There's nobody can ever convince you Santa is real. Santa's real. No amount of shaking you and telling you Santa's real will then put it back. It's just the consciousness itself. It literally vibrates out the solidity of the contraction that separation is real. And once the vibration of the contraction is gone, it can't reconstruct that. You have to wait a cycle of life, or however you want to say it, in order for that. That's why one of the main realizations for deep, true mastery that I talk about is that when you clearly see that the individual identity is a farce, and you clearly see through that, not in a parroting way, but in a mastery way, that one of the first things that you think about is, damn, I can't wait to fool myself again. Because you're not going to get the ability to fool yourself for the next, quote, 50 years or whatever. The next 50 years, you're going to be mastering mastery, you could say, or whatever. But you're not going to be able to fool yourself again until your next labyrinth, or however you want to say that. So that's also pretty telling for me as a sign. Plus, I'm not as resonant with clicking the play button and hearing a recorder or an LLM, for example. I see most of the music coming out of the trumpet is LLMs that I can click the play button on, and the little voice box will say the script like a recorder. So all of those layers, that has a huge amount to do with mastery. All of those little cross-sectional layers, only until you really get back to the source of what you are, is there actual total free associative unpredictability, unable to LLM at that point, because each one of those cross sections is simply from most predictable LLM to less and less and less and less until it's not even an LLM anymore. Because at that point, it's just absolute freedom and absolute free association. And yeah, so that's one of the main, again, key differences that you can tell if you're able to seemingly like click the play button and and you can predict the music that's going to come out of the trumpet, that's showing you that you're clicking back beyond, like, the awareness has expanded beyond that layer of the tea party, is another way to say it. Because the little kid that's doing the tea party thing is saying, I hate you, X culture or group of people. I hate you too, Y culture or group of people, right? That once you pop out of that, right, you can see that that's just clicking the replay button on a little LLM recorder.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Nice.
I love the visual of consciousness vibrating itself out of the sense of separation. Like that's such a cool image somehow, that it's not tangible. It's just a vibration that's going on, and this vibration vibrates itself out,
Yes.
And then you just see clearly. It's like a fog that lifts, and you can kind of condense you can condense the water in air back into that fog to create that illusion again. It just lifts. It's gone, right? And I love what you said about the wanting to, kind of looking forward to it again, because I see again the same idea of a fractal repeating itself in how we observe children, right? That I think so many adults can resonate with that sentiment of wanting to experience childhood again, with all of its ups and downs, right? But so many adults look at little kids and say, gosh, can't wait to be a kid again. Wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't it be fun to believe in Santa again? Like, really believe in Santa again? Like, what a world of magic, right?
Yeah.
The kid gets to live in, and wouldn't that be cool to experience? So, just everywhere, man. Beautiful.
Exactly. Yep. Perfect. Boom. Vibrating out the illusion of separation to perpetual non-separation, and the mastery of being excited for the next dream of separation, to believe in Santa Claus again.
Right. And there's that total equanimity, right? That like, there's nowhere to escape. There's nothing to escape from, and there's nowhere to escape to. It's just all happening within yourself and for yourself, right? Like, there's no other force outside of that is doing this to you.
Yes. Ken, yes. The
beautiful
permanent bootloader realization, and all you're left with is, what do you want? Do you want Santa Claus or do you not want Santa Claus? That's it. Like, you got. So that's where the one choice is, X marks the spot, is your one choice. It's either Christ or not Christ, and that's the only choice that forever exists in infinite God dreams. Christ or not Christ is the only choice that exists in infinite God dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say that, in terms of the transformative choice, but in terms of the neutral choice, which I've talked about on the Digital Metaphysics, is that you can always choose to be a basketball player or to choose to be a violinist have talked about this a lot, or to choose to cook a certain kind of meal and that kind of thing. And that's not really as much of a Christ or not Christ choice, but what I'm speaking about it from is the transformational angle. So there's like the transformational angle and the neutral angle. The transformational angle is all about what either you're going to be choosing contraction or choosing expansion, but the neutral angle is whatever the creative joy of the moment is. And so that one doesn't necessarily have as much to do, coffee or tea doesn't have as much to do with Christ or not Christ, as an example. Whether you want to play basketball or soccer with your friends doesn't have as much to do with Christ or not Christ. Yeah. So jumping ahead, then, so we went up a couple episodes and then we went to freedom tools.
Yeah. So I'm thinking I've gotta hit the sack soon. It's past midnight here. So shall we leave this for another? Because I feel like just looking at those bullet points, that's probably an episode, you know.
Yeah.
And then I can add in between.
I like this idea again. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut from this jumping ahead. So since programs, we'll have Milo. The next episode will be that distillation one that you and I have been envisioning for a bit that we talked about. We'll do that one as the next one. And then later we'll get to, like a couple more weeks after, then we'll have you add other episodes besides the Freedom Tools one.
Yep.
And then we'll have another one queued up after that. Okay, let's do that. And then we'll end this one at 2 hours. That was a good jam sesh.
Yeah, you gotta give me a opportunity to catch up. You're a machine, Atlas, at creating content. So I'm gonna digest, consume, and then get back to you with some juicy questions.
All right, yeah. You're a machine at the jazz sessions, so I'm excited to keep jazzing.
You know, just to end on there was like one last thing that came to me when I heard you speak about, you know, the parent coming into the room and that being that beautiful symbol of ourselves, right? Like turning ourselves around. And you recall Lion King, like the original?
Yes.
So there's that scene when Simba is lost, right? Like he's hanging out with Timon and Pumbaa, and he meets Rafiki, and he's just lost. And he's clearly in despair because he's lost connection to father, right? He's lost connection. Yep. And Rafiki reminds him that he lives in you, man. I mean, that's a whole score, you know. He lives in you. There's a whole stuff.
Yeah.
And then, so his father lives in him, is him, and then he goes to the water, despaired, asking for advice, and Musafa, his father, appears in the sky, saying, "Simba, remember who you are."
Yes, exactly what we just. I'm always here. Yeah. Infinitely patient. Are you ready to come home to me? Yeah.
Talking to yourself from within.
Yeah, from within. Yeah. So perfect. So perfect. Yeah. And it's great because, from that awareness, you can see every single time that you had provided yourself with the little bait of being drawn back out into it. Oh, I can project this kind of stuff. And it's like, no. And project this kind of, no. So that's so powerful to have that clear seeing about where it's also, because it's talked about so much. I got it, lost it, got it, lost it. And once the little Agent Smith bait is clearly seen over and over and over in all different facets and angles and algorithms and possibilities. So good.
Yeah.
Oh, ooh, baby.
also celebrate.
let's get you to bed. Yeah. Okay.
I'm doing my balloons
Oh
first to
yeah,
celebrate.
the jam.
This was
Yes.
awesome, my man. I'm already looking forward to the next one.
Yes. Yes. Same. It was really good. It was very beautiful. Again, holding this jazz session space together. So good.
Hmm.
Hmm.
It's just joy. That's where you feel the creative aspect of it. That essentially we're talking to ourselves about the things that on some level we know. It's like breathing air, and we're talking to each other about like, hey, dude, isn't it awesome that air exists and we get to breathe it? It's like the most natural thing, but we are becoming aware, noticing, just like, wow.
Yes. Yes. Hmm. Same thing as last time, everyone. The link to Milo's channel is also in the description of the video, so go and give him a sub and check out some of his content if it resonates with you hearing the jazz music. And we'll be back with some more content like this soon. Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and if you have any questions that you want us to discuss, or want to join us in the discussions on the future ones, go ahead and drop that in the comments below, or send us an email, simulationseries@gmail.com. And yeah, like, share if it resonated with those that you feel like it would resonate with. So beautiful stuff. I'll go ahead and end this, and then let's just stay in for just another moment. Okay. Any other thoughts? Are you good? Good. Okay.
So good.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Love you. Bye bye.
Thanks. See you next time.